And we weren't interested in legalizing shoplifting, or as I guess we should call it, justice shopping. But, you know, in Minnesota, for example, I think it was Minneapolis, after the George Floyd murder and the riots, I think there was a movement to disband a lot of the police, and they did. I think a lot of the police were let go, or somehow the police force was a lesser force than it was. And what happened was, of course, crime went up in certain areas, and a lot of the officers who had been fired or let go or quit, or for whatever reason they weren't on the force anymore, they were hired as private security. By who? The rich people who could afford to do it. So their neighborhood stayed safe. So that wasn't exactly, I thought, a victory for liberalism.
No, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
Bill Maher went on the Joe Rogan Experience, Joe Rogan's podcast, and Joe Rogan had to school Bill Maher on a few things, but also Bill Maher surprisingly had some stances that I didn't expect, and I don't think you'll expect either when it comes to this Joe Rogan Experience podcast here. Let's check out this clip, a couple of clips here from Bill Maher and Joe Rogan, just discussing the views, the stances of the woke cult. It's some very interesting perspectives from people like Joe Rogan. Like, I never thought I would hear Joe Rogan have these stances, but also some interesting things that Bill Maher had to say as well. So let's check out this clip here from the Joe Rogan Experience.
And we weren't interested in legalizing shoplifting, or as I guess we should call it, justice shopping. But, you know, in Minnesota, for example, I think it was Minneapolis, after the George Floyd murder and the riots, I think there was a movement to disband a lot of the police, and they did. I think a lot of the police were let go, or somehow the police force was a lesser force than it was. And what happened was, of course, crime went up in certain areas, and a lot of the officers who had been fired or let go or quit, or for whatever reason they weren't on the force anymore, they were hired as private security. By who? The rich people who could afford to do it. So their neighborhood stayed safe. So that wasn't exactly, I thought, a victory for liberalism.
No, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. Austin defunded the police and then refunded it. And refunded it by far more than they defunded it. Because they just course corrected. They went, okay, this is not working. We have to do something to fix it, which makes me very happy. Because I was really shocked that they wanted to do that.
It's good that there are places out there that are willing to recognize their mistakes, like Joe Rogan is talking about here with Austin. But there are always going to be some places, and it feels like more and more nowadays, like, you know, LA or New York, where they're going to make these changes that the woke cult is calling for, and then they're never going to go back on them, even though they have the data to back up. And there's wild stories coming out from these places that have defunded the police and taken these woke stances. There's tons of data stating that those decisions were absolutely god-awful decisions. But because they are part of the woke cult, they don't really care about data, statistics. They only care about pushing their agenda forward. It's good that there's places like Austin out there that exist that did actually revert that. But there's a ton of places, and that those places are growing more and more, that are not reverting. They're actually just, you know, sticking to their guns on these terrible decisions. Let's get back into this clip.
Because there's a lot of crime. And where my club is on 6th Street, that's a wild place. 6th Street gets wild. And there's a lot of crime there. And there's a good police presence there. And we have a lot of police at the club. We hire off-duty cops to work the club. And a lot of security. We want to make it as safe as possible. But the streets in the city, like, you know, from pandemic on, it's not good. You know, it's sketchy. And I'm glad they recognized it and did something.
Well,
because so many places just aren't course correcting.
Chicago.
Yeah.
I mean, not just the places where, I mean, murders have been happening way out of control in Chicago among the African American community for far too long, and not really reported in the way that they should be. It's amazing how black lives don't seem to matter when they're taken by black lives.
Right.
But
kind of base, man. It's kind of like, I don't expect Bill Maher to say things like that, you know, but then he'll say something like that. It's like, oh wait, is he starting to wake up a little bit? And then he'll just go on a crazy woke rant like why Joe Biden's doing the best job of any president ever, and it's like, oh, never mind, he's still Bill Maher.
But I mean, now Chicago my friends who live there say it's not safe anywhere.
Yeah, it's very sketchy. Very sketchy.
And that's Chicago.
Yeah, Chicago used to be great. It used to be easy.
If you enjoy content like this, and hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. It really does help me out a ton. Let's get back to the video.
It used to be a great city. I mean, it always had problems in some areas, but I mean, even those areas. I had a conversation once with a driver who was a former cop, and what he told me is that they arrested all the key drug players, and then there was a power struggle, and things got way worse. He's like, their idea was like, go in, arrest the big kingpins, and then we'll clean up the city. It didn't work at all. The opposite had an effect. It was the opposite effect. There was way more crime. He said it just got way more violent.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of the murders that happen are over nonsense. You know, somebody dissed you on social media or made fun of your sneakers or some shit. I mean, some of it is drug turf and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And it's really sad to see places like Chicago go downhill like that, man. Let me know in the comments, like, if you guys ever been to Chicago, how you liked it and everything. But I went to Chicago maybe like 10 years ago, and it was bad for sure. Like, I ran into some bad areas, like Joe Rogan was saying, but it's not as bad as it is now. Like, it's not even worth going there anymore. But it's a super nice city, and it's really unfortunate, like, you know, what's happened with the crime stuff and what's happening with these other woke places as well. That could be really nice, you know, really beautiful places, but they're just decisions that are pushed onto them by the woke cult that they can't back down from, because then they're going to be, you know, they're going to be kicked out of the woke cult. They can't back out. So let me know what you guys are thinking about that.
A body positivity shit, though, is men. Nobody gives a fuck about men. If men are fat, you're just fat. That's like when James Corden tried that shit with you.
Yes.
It was such an obvious ploy. Oh, you're hurting my feelings,
Yes.
Bill.
Oh, yes.
Fat shaming. First of all, that guy's fat from food. He's not like, oh my God, he's got a genetic disorder. He's just, that's how guy's obviously not working out and living a good life, eating some nice food,
And
a little plump.
yeah. And
Fixable.
Interesting. And interesting, a year or so after he made his big crusade against me, he signed a big contract, I think, with Weight Watchers. You know, he turned right around. But even Weight Watchers is out of style, because now we've given up on the idea that obesity is something that can be contained by exercise and diet. It's now a disease. Mm-hmm. I mean, these new drugs they have.
Ozempic. And things like that. Yeah.
I was reading about Ozempic. I didn't know this until recently. They have zero clue why it works. They know that it works, just not why. This would bother me.
Something tells me, you know, and I don't mean to go off topic or anything, something tells me that they do know why it works, but they don't want to reveal why it works, because I think it might help solve the obesity problem, you know, in the United States and the Western world in general. But also when it comes to the body positivity movement and the fact that obesity is a disease and it's a disorder and all this other nonsense, I think, you know, people just like to be victims. You know, they like to blame everything on anyone except for themselves is what they like to do. So if they can find any way to blame it on a disorder, on a disease or anything, make up something new to blame it on, they will, because they never want to take accountability for anything. In reality, if you're fat, you need to eat less, you need to move more. And that's the reality of things. But the cult that Bill Maher is a part of, they don't want you to do that. They just want you to blame it on the government, the food supply, the fact that you have a disorder, a disease, thyroid problem, whatever. It's just all nonsense, man.
A little, you know.
It should.
That if they're giving me something and they're like, hey, this new miracle pill, just take it. We're working on the reason why it might do this to you, but until then, just fuck it.
There's no biological free lunch either. I have friends that are on that stuff, and one friend who just got off of it because he was having some serious gastrointestinal issues that are apparently one of the side effects. There's no free lunch. If you're taking an injection that makes you less hungry, something's going on. That's probably not good.
Yes.
Yep, you're probably sacrificing, you know, if you want to make that sacrifice, it's kind of similar to like steroids, like, you know, taking anabolics. You're sacrificing some years off the back end of your life more than likely, but you get to live a more, you know, happy life, you know, in the short term. So it's kind of like the trade-off. What do you want to do? But I just found it interesting, the fact that they were kind of exposing the body positivity movement, Joe Rogan and Bill Maher together. Joe Rogan kind of educating Bill Maher on a few things, you know, kind of forcing him into some. If you haven't watched this full podcast, by the way, definitely go check it out, because there's a lot more discussions than just these 2 points, where Joe Rogan is just basically schooling Bill Maher on these topics and forcing Bill Maher to admit that the woke cult is wrong on these topics. Let me know what you guys are thinking about these couple of clips that I showed you. If you did enjoy the video, please leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I hope to see you guys on the next one.